Hello, everybody. This is Kiana Park. I'm with SpyPond Partners, your facilitator for this webinar. Welcome to webinar 39 in our Transportation Asset Management webinar series, sponsored by Federal Highways and AASHTO. Today, we'll be focusing on Transportation Asset Management Plan implementation. We have presented webinars in this series every 2 months going back to 2012 on a variety of topics in asset management. In our last webinar, we highlighted some interesting applications of advanced technologies and transportation asset management. It was a great session, and I encourage you to look it up on the AASHTO TAM portal. There you'll find more information on this webinar series by just visiting tam-portal.com and click TAM Events in the main menu. You can also register for upcoming webinars as they're announced. And you will find archives of previous webinars. Links to the video and slides from today's webinar will be posted on the site. If you have any suggestions on future webinar topics or have questions for the presenters during today's webinar, please submit your comments or questions using the webinar's Q&A feature. We will answer all the questions during the Q&A session at the end of the webinar. Just FYI, the two of our presentations today are pre-recorded due to schedule conflicts. So if you have questions for the Arkansas and Minnesota presentations, please send them through the Q&A feature and we'll get them answered, but they won't be done live today during the webinar. So now I will turn it over to Steve Gay of Federal Highways for a brief welcome and intro on behalf of our co-sponsor, Federal Highways Administration. Steve.
Thank you, Yana. Federal Highway Administration, in cooperation with AASHTO, is very pleased to sponsor this valuable webinar series. We've reached our 39th webinar today, and we're looking forward to many more to come. This series is first and foremost an opportunity to share practical, useful, timely information with the asset management community. Today, we're taking a look at Transportation Asset Management Plan implementation efforts. You can see I'm already looking ahead to the implementation and next steps. This is a great time to look at implementation now that states have completed and submitted their final TAMPs. Federal Highway is busy reviewing them. So I think it's 8 states already have had their processes and consistency determination approved by Federal Highway. Many states are in the final stages of just making tweaks or addressing minor comments. The focus turns to implementing the process improvements and addressing some of the gaps identified in the TAMP, and also taking a look at some of the issues, challenges, and especially the lessons learned through the TAMP development process itself. The TAMP development process was a learning experience for all of us. And our speakers today are going to share their perspectives and some of the key lessons they learned along the way, as well as help us understand some of the benefits and challenges their agencies experience. I hope you take away from this webinar several processes, actions that will be beneficial to your agency. You know, I got to say, I looked at 15 or 20 of these, and it really jumps out at you that every agency is different. So, you know, you're going to have to make tweaks as you hear what took place in the respective organizations talking. I think you're going to enjoy today's presentations, and I hope we'll all learn a lot this afternoon. I'm certainly looking forward to it. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Yana Park of SpyPond Partners. Yana, thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Now, as Steve mentioned previously, the purpose of the webinar series is to share lessons learned, ideas, and knowledge with the asset management community. For this webinar, the primary learning objectives are building working knowledge of key concepts and definitions relevant to TAM and TAMP implementation, beginning to apply this knowledge in the context of the TAMP implementation at transportation agencies today in order to answer the following questions. What approaches are agencies taking to TAM implementation? What benefits can my agency expect to achieve through TAMP implementation efforts? What are key lessons learned for agencies as they move forward TAMP implementation? And of course, to share lessons learned, ideas, and knowledge. For the agenda today, Karen Miller from the Missouri Department of Transportation will deliver our first presentation. In our second presentation, we'll hear from Andrew Williams from the Ohio Department of Transportation. Following Andrew, we'll have Brad McCaleb from the Arkansas DOT, and lastly, we'll have Dave Solsrud and Shannon Foss of the Minnesota Department of Transportation, who will finish up our presentations for this webinar. Today, we have pre-recorded both Brad and Dave and Shannon's presentation, as I mentioned earlier. So again, when we have Q&A at the end, we'll pass along any questions to Brad and to Dave and Shannon, and they have promised to follow up directly. Just another reminder, please submit your comments or questions using the webinar Q&A feature in the menu bar that you have in your GoToWebinar interface at any time during today's presentations. And in response to the most frequently asked questions, yes, we will make the slides and video available after today's webinar at tam.portal.com. So now let's get started with our first speaker. Karen Miller moved from the private sector to the public sector 16 years ago when she started working for the Missouri Department of Transportation. Her focus throughout her career has been on re-engineering processes to streamline operations along with performance management. She is an active member of the AASHTO Committee on Performance-Based Management. And with that, I'll turn it over to Karen.
So can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Well, thank you so much for asking me to present today. Again, my name is Karen Miller with the Missouri Department of Transportation, and I'm absolutely delighted to share how we have implemented asset management throughout our organization. Now, before we start talking about asset management, I want to give you a few slides just to talk about the framework within which our organization operates, because that's important to understand before we can talk about asset management. We are governed by a 6-person, independent, bipartisan commission who sets transportation policy and funding. We're divided into 7 districts, and we have a decentralized organizational structure. That means we have staff in central office as well as in each district for planning, traffic, maintenance, construction, design, bridge, pavement, safety, finance, facilities, and procurement. MoDOT leadership strongly supports this decentralization, as we know that the local staff or the local people can better identify with those who live and work in their areas. We've got 34,000 miles, 10,400 bridges to take care of. Of our 9 MPOs, we've got 5 which are by state and 4 are TMAs. We have 19 regional planning commissions that cover the entire state, or some states call them or refer to them as RTPOs. Now, like many of you, we face funding challenges. We're ranked 7th nationally in highway miles, but only 48th nationally in revenue per mile. The gas tax of 17 cents per gallon has not increased since 1996, making it worth about 7 cents in today's purchasing power. So our focus is on keeping the existing system in the condition it is in today, which is what our stakeholders indicated when we did our long-range transportation process. This is MoDOT's award-winning planning framework that's been in place for well over a decade. So needs are identified at the local level by these RPCs and MPOs, and then prioritized through the districts to be programmed into the STIP. So it all starts with the locals. A cornerstone here at MoDOT is performance management. We have been using this for over 15 years to make decisions and drive results through the tracker publication and our quarterly meetings. We've got about 175 staff statewide who meet every single quarter, senior leadership across the state, to look at these measures, talk about them, and figure out where we need to go and what we need to do next. Performance management is fully integrated into our culture, as each division and each district creates their own tracker based on their business needs. So for example, I work in the planning division. So planning division has a planning tracker. We decide what measures to include. We meet on it quarterly and we talk about it. MoDOT recognized the need to collect transportation data to use in decision-making over 2 decades ago. We developed our own system that we call TMS, the Transportation Management System, which links the data to a common location referencing system. The system includes GIS mapping tools, a pavement management tool, and lots of other applications. About a year ago, we went public with this site, and so now this is an external web-based tool, which makes it easier for MoDOT's planning partners to access this data and use it for their planning purposes. So I wanted to give you that brief overview first, so you could understand how this all works together and the foundation MoDOT has created upon which to effect change. So planning encompasses all these areas with data as the foundation, and performance management and asset management as outcomes of that statewide data. So now let's talk about asset management. We started that in 2006, again about the same time as performance management. Those go hand in hand, as you well know. It was focused on pavement and bridges through various campaigns. In 2016, we decided to formalize asset management similar to what we did with the tracker. So of course, what did we start with? We started with our award-winning planning framework, and we took the discussion to our planning partners, the MPOs, the RPCs, and the districts, to ensure everyone understood what does asset management mean here at MoDOT. It's the whole system, it's not just NHS. What would be included, and what's the impact to them? Missourians told us our first goal is to take care of the existing system. That's a very easy concept for our partners to grasp. Preserve the roads and bridges in the same condition they are today with the limited resources we've been provided. Next, we developed Excel templates for each district to populate to develop a 10-year asset management plan. So district by district, they have to develop their own plan. Once these templates are shared, the process starts with a statewide asset management kickoff webinar led by our chief engineer and senior leadership staff from central office and district staff, making sure everyone understands the asset management and performance management goals. So this includes staff from safety, pavement, bridge, construction, design, financial, planning, traffic, and of course the local federal highway and FTA staff. Then each district makes updates to their 10-year plan. Remember, MoDOT is decentralized, so districts have the option to add items, if they want, to their specific region. Each district has a team that evaluates treatment types, life cycles, cost, average number of treatments needed, etc. We focus on less expensive preservation treatments on a routine cycle instead of expensive rehab and reconstruction treatments. And what may work in northern Missouri may not work in southern Missouri because of the changes in geography, the climate difference, so it's specific to each district. After each district submits their plans, central office reviews them for consistency and accuracy. Then each district, one by one, has a video conference with senior leadership looking at how that district's asset management plan fits into the overall goals. Hard questions are asked, lots of discussion takes place. It's the same cross-functional staff attending this call too. After that, districts make updates if needed to their asset management plan and submit it. It's the asset management and performance management goals that drive the projects selected in the STIP. Remember, the locals are the ones who start the prioritization process. So each MPO and RPC brings a prioritized list developed with their stakeholders to the district. When each district meets with their partners, the asset management and performance management goals are incorporated into the prioritization process. So it's the district and planning partners who determine which projects will be programmed into the STIP based on these goals. So let's talk about results. What are these STIP projects driven by the asset management plan providing? So here's the snapshot of what this last year's STIP provided, as well as looking at the last 10 years, we've delivered over 4,400 projects worth over $12 billion, coming at 7% under budget. That is something to celebrate. Asset management has had a profound impact on MoDOT. The Commission recently changed the funding formula. When senior leadership looked at each of the district's asset management plans, it became very clear that some of the districts did not have sufficient funding to even maintain their infrastructure. So, for the first time since 2006, understanding that inflation has eroded purchasing power, the Commission updated the funding formula to ensure each district could maintain their area. That's what Missourians indicated was their first priority: keep the roads and bridges in good condition. We didn't get any additional funds. We've got the same pie. We just split the pie up in a way that reflected the asset management plan. That's the beauty of having a culture focused on performance management, on asset management, on innovations, and on practical design. So what do customers think? Well, this graph says it all. As road conditions have improved, so has customer satisfaction. That's the beauty of having performance management in place for so many years. You can go back and look and do all these correlations. This is probably my favorite slide of the whole presentation. So whenever we start a new program at MoDOT, we always measure ourselves. How does what we plan to do compare to what we actually did? We all need to be accountable to the plan, and I'm thrilled to see these results. So this compares what the district said they were going to do in the asset management plan versus what actually got programmed into the STIP. In other words, how well is asset management being implemented? So whenever you start a new program, there's always lots of bumps and restarts, especially with the decentralized approach that we use, where everyone statewide is involved in that implementation. So let's look at this graph. We're measuring the number of miles, square foot of deck, as well as the costs. The first year, represented by the blue square, compared to last year, the green triangle shows a vast improvement. The goal or the target is to be as close to 0% as possible, because what we indicate in the asset management plan should be reflected in this STIP. At the end of each asset management cycle, we solicit feedback from the districts on what's needed to make the process better and implement relevant suggestions. In this next cycle, we're going to be going beyond the roads, bridges, and ADA to include mobility. I want to emphasize again, this is the results. This shows our statewide system, not just NHS. We also measure the number of lane miles, pavement cost per lane mile, to know if our assumptions need to be adjusted. We do similar measurements with bridges, again, to know if we have to make any adjustments on our assumptions. So just to recap, how is MoDOT implementing asset management of our statewide system? We developed a plan, we communicated it, it's being used by staff statewide. Our asset management plan is driving the funding distribution to our districts. The asset management plan is driving what projects get programmed into our STIP. We're tracking it, we're monitoring it, and we're seeing that it is producing tangible results. We review the process each year with input from staff statewide, and then make improvements so that it gets better every year. We've got the whole process documented in our engineering policy guide, which is the link on this slide. Missourians stated they want us to keep the existing system in the same condition it is today. That is our primary goal with asset management, which drives projects that get programmed and built into the STIP. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Karen. I like this slide you like best too, and I think it's something that we could spend some time on understanding. So maybe we'll get a few questions on that. All right, our next presentation we'll hear is from Andrew Williams. Andrew is a 30-year transportation professional with the Ohio Department of Transportation, where he's now serving as the administrator of the Technical Services Division. As administrator of Technical Services, Andrew is responsible for infrastructure management, overseeing various operations such as GIS, highway performance monitoring systems, traffic monitoring, and asset management. Today, ODOT is known as a leader in infrastructure data collection and analysis. Now you'll get a chance to hear more on this topic from Andrew himself. Okay, Andrew, let's hear your presentation.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you, and Karen, outstanding job. I was jotting down quite a few notes. I get a chance to learn from so many great practitioners out there. Hi, everybody. My name is Andrew Williams with the Ohio Department of Transportation. I'm going to talk to you about what we feel is a very successful initiative that we undertook back in 2012. It actually started in 2010. So we were slightly ahead of the MAP 21 requirements. And so when it came along, we were already talking about putting in an asset management plan. And so we leveraged the federal initiative to make sure that we dotted I's and crossed T's, that we were compliant, but also to motivate our folks that we were going in the right direction. So I'm going to talk to you very quickly here and hopefully very informatively about how we implemented our asset management plan and what steps we took to ensure that we had a level of success. And I will say that the success that we've gotten out of this is has been remarkable. First thing, I'm not going to go into a lot of statistics about Ohio. Most of you already heard about us being the 5th largest interstate system and how many bridges we have and so on and so forth. So I'm going to move downstream to, we developed an asset management plan that was conducive and tailored to the state of Ohio. And these are some of the things that we took away from that actually helped us do what we felt was successful in implementing that. And the first thing was we had to ask some very tough questions. And the first thing we started out with, what do we want this plan to do for us? A lot of times, the federal mandate came out, but what do you want this to do for you? We do not want the federal mandate to just be an exercise, just to be doing an exercise. We ought to be able to glean from that some good business practices that helps us within our day-to-day, within our DOT. So what do we want this plan to do for us? What are the measurable objectives? How mature are our TAM activities? Does leadership have an appetite for this plan? That is critical. Kind of what Karen was talking about, top down, them pushing down and supporting the initiative. If leadership is not on board, it's a tough traveled road. How do we communicate and engage to start cultural change? This has been very important for us because the people who are going to be responsible for really implementing and doing the day-to-day boots on the ground are the people that probably need to understand what's going on, what the plan is supposed to do. So we wanted to make sure we create a level of desire in all of our DBOs, data business owners, and our SMEs, subject matter experts, and we started to see a change in our culture. Do we have the data and the systems in place to execute the plan and monitor success? Is the plan sustainable? Okay, I mean, we can come up with a great plan, but at the end of the day, if it's one that is not sustainable, that what we thought was a great plan could very easily turn out to be a very bad plan. So key to implementation is sustainability. And then how will we communicate the results both internally and externally? I did not update this slide. We just found out that we're hitting at about 116 billion now. 5 years ago, we were at 115 billion. But this is an important communications tool. It's part of our marketing plan in which we share with the general public, the locals, and anybody else as part of our communication levels, is that this is what our portfolio looks like. To drive home the point that if you were managing a portfolio of 115 billion, hopefully you were not doing it blindly. But we have about $115 billion portfolio. Now it's up to 116 billion. The other part of it is one of those questions that we had to ask was how mature were we at the time? And as you can see from this spider diagram, the blue being where we were currently at 5-6 years ago, we weren't very mature in some of the areas like governance and management, level of service, data systems, the skills and processes needed to be able to bring these things to bear. Asset management strategy, and at the time we didn't have a plan. We just talked about it. So this spider diagram helped us identify where we were currently at, and that helped us assess the gaps in terms of where we wanted to be, and then we started putting the pieces in place to actually get there. So I think a good maturity model exercise goes a long way in terms of supporting implementation because it tells you the things that you need to put in place to be successful in the implementation. So then we get to the objectives. Our objectives were very straightforward. Again, what do we want the plan to do? Well, we want this plan to be able to allow us to do performance-based, data-driven asset management planning that allows ODOT to measure and manage infrastructure conditions. We want to be able to establish a centralized geospatial-based transportation asset inventory database that we can share both internally and externally. We wanted to make sure we can integrate all those transportation assets in a centralized inventory database to support asset management process, allowing us to do the cross-asset optimization or planning and things like that. And then we wanted to improve the accuracy of the road inventory, which is the underlying base for all the things that we do when it comes to asset management and its reporting. So implementation is very important. And so we wanted to make sure data was driving this thing, and we wanted to make sure that we got it accurate all the way down to the base, which is the road inventory data. The other objectives were establish a statewide inventories for pavement, bridges, and culverts. And then we also added overhead signs, barriers, and BMPs. We came up with this list initially, which we call tier ones, based off of risk. What was the risk if we did not have the data? and also the risk of being able to implement a sustainable plan if we didn't have the data. And so that's how these became the critical ones that we worked on first. And I'm pleased to say today we have those inventories. We want to implement an enterprise payment management system and integrate it with our assets and establish life cycle planning. As you saw in that graphic, the payments was our biggest portfolio item in terms of the amount of money or the value, with bridges coming in second and culverts coming in third. And so we were more mature on the payment side, so we implemented a payment management system, DTEMS, that we utilized to help bring in some of the other assets and do some of the cross-asset management planning. And we're planning to build on that and also establish a life cycle plan. And then we wanted to also, as an objective, develop an enterprise bridge management system. We have a process right now. We're actually going through the pieces and the steps of putting together what we need to do the bridge management application. The next thing was we talked about leadership. And this little pyramid here outlines our asset management leadership team, which has done just an incredible job of implementing asset management and helping us develop that plan. This is a multidisciplinary group made up of primarily the internal stakeholders within the DOT. We have some of our MPOs that sit on it, as well as some of our local muni partners that actually chime in on these monthly meetings. And the reason that I think this has been very successful is because if you look at these different levels here, we have a two-way communication and push of information and ideas. One from the asset management leadership team at the very bottom, which is the people who are doing the day-to-day work, and that's both in our central office, districts, and MPOs. We have 12 districts in the state of Ohio, and so we have representation in all. We also were successful in the leadership giving us the ability to fill 12 transportation asset management coordinators that are in the districts, and they're carrying out the functions from the central office. Every single asset has a data business owner or a DBO. They're housed in central office, responsible for policy, and we also have SMEs, subject matter experts. Those are the folks that are out in the districts, and they're responsible for the day-to-day management of the particular assets. So again, implementation, the key to that is sustainability. We feel like this structure gives us the sustainability. And then at the very top, the executive management pushes down initiatives that may come from the governor's office or things that we may have to change. This has allowed us to be very, very nimble, meaning that we can pivot on objectives and things that we're doing fairly quickly to try to make sure we're catering to what the governance structure is identified as a big initiative. For example, we were successful in actually getting what we call a motor user fee, I'm not going to say tax, but a motor user fee. I'm not allowed to use that word. But anyway, we were successful in getting that. We got an additional 10.5% or 10.5 cents in terms of the gas and motor fuel that will be going toward the state DOT projects. And I'll show you a graphic here to kind of show you how we utilize the asset management and the implemented plan to help drive home that point and support what we wanted to get from the legislature. And I think we were highly successful. Another point of note regarding getting some of those additional funds, listen to Karen's story, is that we utilized our asset management plan, but back in early 2000s when we did this, it took almost 2 years. With this plan being in place, we were able to prove our point in 6 weeks. So again, very sustainable plan, which again, if you cater to sustainability, the implementation can be a success. So our asset management leadership team has 4 subgroups that's made up of. And it's our communications group. They're the ones that put together the marketing plan. And we actually hired a real marketing firm so that we had an elevator speech for every single level that we could identify, from the legislature all the way down to the boots on the ground maintenance, all the way out externally to homeowners. For example, if we were going to do a chip seal in somebody's neighborhood, we have a communications script for that. If you're going to be boots on the ground, you're going to be talking to the local newspaper, we already have those canned speeches. And the reason why we did that is because we wanted to make sure that we had a consistent message all the way from the top to the bottom, from the bottom back up to the top. So again, sustainability requires you to speak the same language. And so our communications group, they handle that. The infrastructure group, they're responsible for the work plan development. We needed a group that actually bird dogs that, for lack of a better word, overseeing that the work plan is being developed. I'll spend some time talking about that here in a second. And then our TAM audit group. This is a transportation asset management audit group, just an amazing group of what I call smart people who actually get together. They vet through all of the different technology applications. They vet through any asset that's going to be collected, and they vet through and come up with the solutions. And in some cases, we have seen efficiencies or savings as high as $10 million in terms of solutions that were given to us either by vendors and what have you. And then when they went through and ran it through their process, they were able to bring some of those things down significantly. So that group allows us, again, from an implemented plan, to also ensure that we are connecting dots between the technology stack, and I'll show you that here in a second. Data governance group, again, data-driven process, data-driven plan. So in order to be able to implement successfully, we got to have some governance to this. We do have, we had in place some governance pieces based off the TAM audit group, but we have moved to implementing a full-blown data governance program. We're in the midst of doing that right now. We are moving, we're in month number 6. We've asked for a new position of a chief data officer, which we should be getting that classification and HR recommendation here soon, along with some analysts to help that position. We have a data governance committee structure that's being recommended to us by our vendor, our consultant. We have a policy development process that's on the way, as well as we've already identified what the data governance framework and the data lifecycle looks like. So we're well on our way to establishing these things and putting these things in place. So hopefully next year this time, that'll be there to even give us more efficiencies. We're estimating to management that we think we can save another 15% on our capital program by just having data governance put in place to go along with the asset management plan. Our capital program is $2.2 billion, so we're kind of jumping out there on a limb in terms of what we think we're going to be able to get from an efficiency standpoint. So this is the structure of our asset management leadership team that, again, supports the implementation from a sustainability standpoint. From that, here's our systematic process for optimizing investments. Again, we wanted to be able to manage infrastructure conditions. We want to measure and manage. So in order to be able to do that, we had to come up with a process. And here's our overarching process. If you go throughout the building here in ODOT, you will see this graphic posted in various different places, in different conference rooms and offices. Again, part of our communication and our marketing plan. And so very simply, we start by maintaining critical asset inventories that we talked about, those tier 1s that I talked about, and some of the tier 2s are also in there. We established performance targets and funding needs, and then we developed our work plan. And then we're monitoring progress for continuous improvement, and that communication, strategic direction, and progress made, or monitoring for continuous improvement, is very critical for the implementation and the sustainability portion of the asset management plan. So this is very simple, easy to digest. Folks can kind of rally around it to figure out what their role and responsibility is as it pertains to this optimized investment systematic process. And then getting a little bit deeper, going into the capital program process. Again, we average about $2.2 billion in terms of what we dole out from a capital program per year. And so this has been an amazing, amazing process. What used to happen before I get into this one was we basically, here in central office, we generated what the targets were. We gave them to the district, but we didn't give them a whole lot of instructions about how to meet it. That became an issue for us. I think it was a good first step. But what we found was we kind of painted or backed our districts into a corner. And sometimes some of the decisions that were made, some of the treatments that were picked, some of the investment strategies that were done probably were not some of the best, okay? So we wanted to get away from that. With this process that you're looking at on the screen right here, it is more of a top-down one. What I mean by that is that the central office, we control the performance metrics, and we're identifying that using the pavement management system, for example. But we're controlling that, and what we're making the districts responsible for is delivery. So basically, when you go through this process, we're utilizing the pavement management system, integrating our bridge management and culvert management processes to come up with funding scenarios and condition goals. So once we establish those goals, we're then doling that down to the districts, and we're saying we need you to deliver. We're asking them to deliver 75% of what comes out of this process, with a 25% flexibility that allows them to do some things a little bit different. And then we have a compliancy portion, very similar to what Karen was talking about, where they're actually going back and forth with us in terms of what they want to do, and then we're measuring them on how compliant they are with what's coming out of the system, okay? At the same time, on a parallel track, we have the maintenance folks, the maintenance and operations people. They are zero-based funding, okay? So they're going through and identifying what do they need to be able to do their day-to-day work and come up with a funding mechanism. So going back and forth, what comes out of the pavement management system, for example, may be a project that's 3 or 4 years off. Well, the operations folks will see that and realize the fact that they've got to do what we call a gap project to hold that roadway or that bridge or culvert or whatever over until the capital program comes. If that doesn't work, then they simply communicate to their planning folks in the district that they may need to move a project up. And this going back and forth has been an amazing, amazing process and collaboration that has yielded us huge results. At the end of the day, those two plans come together to form one work plan. And that one work plan concept is really where we're seeing our efficiency, that collaboration and things like that. We also have a term we use called ready to pave projects. These are projects where we're asking the maintenance and operations folks, before the year before a project's supposed to happen, are there any efficiencies that you can affect on that project before it happens? So for example, if they were going to chip seal a road, can we do the crack seal? Okay? Can we do some of the repairs before the paving project? And in some cases, a lot of cases, we're saving anywhere from $250,000 to about $1 million in just that efficiency. So there's a lot of things that we can do in and around this process. And what it does, again, it creates desire. And when you create desire, you can change culture. So again, sustainability or your implementation might go astray. And so this process has yielded us big dividends. One of the things that you have to keep in mind with these systems is that a lot of people look at them as a black box, and the things that come out of them are not intuitive. And so again, if you can create the desire, if you can communicate effectively, if you can identify what's in it for the particular data business owners, what we call them, or the folks who are responsible for the policies and the day-to-day, and connect them at the hip, then you can get rid of some of these question marks of what comes out of that, because we are talking about the same thing. We're going the same direction. Because again, most of you are familiar with pavement management systems. A lot of times when they tell you to work on a good roadway from a preventive maintenance standpoint, while a bad roadway gets a little worse, that is not intuitive. And so you've got to take the time to educate in order to be sustainable in your implemented asset management plan. Life cycle management, again, sustainability in the implementation. Once you can identify the handoffs, and in this graphic here, you're seeing a handoff from the time we collect data through the systems that we utilize that data to the outputs that come from it in terms of performance measures, back to the life cycle planning, the budgets, the capital side, and zero-based budgeting on the maintenance side to establish performance measures, to development of work plans, utilizing aggressive treatments, preservation treatments, as well as state-of-the-art technology, and a huge piece on the collaboration. And then we're designing, and then we're building some things, and then we're handing back off the maintenance again. So this again allows us to identify along the way the different life cycle plans of the relevant assets that come into play. But also with this collaboration, we're targeting the handoffs, because in order to implement a plan successfully, I've got to understand who's responsible for what and where. And then what you'll find is you start to realize efficiencies in how you do it. For example, our TAM audit group is working toward converting DGN files from MicroStation into GIS files that can be used so we can auto-populate some of these assets coming through the plans onto into a database that actually would trigger some of the construction and maintenance folks in terms of their inspections and in terms of their post-inspections and identifying those new assets so we can retire them and update our databases. So some exciting work is going on here that we're really happy about. But again, sustainability is what we're focused in on. And then what do we get out of this? What we wanted to get out of this was being able to go to a performance-based, data-driven plan. And from that, if you look at the dots on the bottom, before we got the motor vehicle user fees, okay, the tax, we were looking at a deficit on the pavement side that looked like this, the bottom graphic that you see there. And so we were able to communicate the gap in terms of where we wanted to be and where we thought we could be sustainable. And so we backed our way into what that sustainability will look like. And then this program has allowed us to mitigate some of that gap, okay? And so the old investment strategy, the way we were doing it before, kind of backing the districts into a corner, just was not working, at all. And what we're realizing now, we estimate that we'll be about $300 million in efficiency based off the new process that I showed you. We were trending more towards $400 million over the 6-year planning horizon. Absolutely incredible. And I know some of the questions are, well, how in the world did you measure how you were getting this efficiency? And so the efficiency came in a lot of different ways. We're using aggressive preservation treatments, the state-of-the-art technology, the more collaboration. But what we were doing was it allowing us to pave 1,700 more additional miles per year. And we feel like we're maintaining them safer because of the collaboration. And we were touching about 150 additional bridges, as well as additional culverts. And so that's where we were getting a lot of the savings from. The old method, we were 1,700 fewer miles, which means it was hard for us to meet the critical success factor, which is our performance measure that I showed you, from a pavement condition rating standpoint. And so we think we're going to get big dividends from the touching 150 additional bridges in terms of sweeping them and cleaning them, as well as those aggressive preservation treatments and utilizing an optimized strategy coming from our pavement management system. So that's how we're measuring that. And we haven't even begun to measure all of the other efficiency that we're getting by having the technology stack that we have in place, which is making it more efficient for our folks out in the field to go out and scope projects in terms of identifying what they need to do, in terms of their designs and what have you. Things that used to take them 2 and 3 weeks to do, they can do in a matter of hours now by having data share portals and using GIS tools and technology. So those are the kind of things that we're doing to get the efficiency. But again, it allows us to have a level of sustainability in terms of our asset management plan. So the monitor for continuous improvement, what are we going to do here? We're planning on basically keeping track of our critical success factors. We're going to make sure that we revisit our goals and our targets and establish new ones where we need to have them. We're going to always try to keep our eye toward identifying where we may have performance gaps. And then we're going to make adjustments to our capital and maintenance programs. And again, a sustainable TAM can manage performance, okay? It can manage risk. It can help you manage expenditure on infrastructure assets in an optimal manner. So that's what a sustainable asset management plan does for you. Our technology portfolio, we list it this way because it's a level of maturity for us. On the foundational side, the Esri roads and highways that we implemented helped us clean up our road inventory. It also gave us a base network to be able to utilize to make sure that we're reconciling all of this data to one common LRS. Our payment management system is used the way I showed you in the earlier slide, as well as ELLIS is where we develop our capital programs. And then our SMS is our structures management system and our bridge inventory. All of these things are linked. These are foundational core things. And then we start building capacity. We start building knowledge. utilizing the Esri Collector app, which we utilize to collect a lot of our data out in the field. We have 88 counties. There's 4 iPads in each county that they're utilizing to collect assets and do inspections on. The MS2 traffic counts program, which is housing our traffic counts in the cloud, that allows us to bring it back down tied to the same LRS. And then our maintenance management system, which is basically work order based, allowing us to capture the work that's being done in the field. I will say we're currently replacing that application, but we're going to be using it for the next 2 years. But maintenance management is very critical for us. And then from an information discovery standpoint, once we're starting to build the knowledge, it allows us to start understanding what the data tells us. So our TAM system, which is a system that gets about 2,500 hits a day from as far away as Indonesia. I have no idea what the person in Indonesia is doing when they pull this data, but we have over 100 data sets in there that are GIS layers that allows you to see things on the map. So it's one common database of data that is used for all of our different planning, our work plan development, as well as allowing folks internally and externally to pull data, kind of similar to what Karen is talking about. All of our consultants, our private citizens, our local partners, MPOs, counties, cities, they can pull data right from here, which is a huge efficiency for us. And then our PathWeb system, which is basically our photo imaging system that allows us to see the roadway network. And then at the very top, business intelligence, we just implemented a tool called TAM DST, which allows us to leverage all of this data in a BI tool to further make better decisions off of all of this particular data that we actually have. So again, $400 million redirected over 6 years, aggressive preservation, state-of-the-art, and collaboration is the way that we actually got it. We feel like we can get another 15% or so by having a data governance structure put in place tied to the plan. Again, the key is everything is tied together. I'm going to go back to this slide again. All of these applications that you see on your screen are connected. There's no one-offs. They're tied to the same LRS. And in some cases, some of these projects were actually built off of each other, which even gave us more efficiencies. So we're trying to make sure that everything has a linkage to ensure that we got the same data and we're seeing the same thing, allows us to go forward as one agency. And then the last thing I'm going to highlight, the reason why we do what we do. We measure and manage. And one of the things that's critical for us, and also one of the main initiatives of our new Governor DeWine, as well as our new Director of Transportation, Director Jack Marchbanks. In 2017, we had 1,179 people die in Ohio crashes, fatalities. In 2018, I think that number is down slightly, but it's still too high for us. And this graphic, which I think is very telling and people really kind of hone in on it, is that what can we do as practitioners of asset management to affect safer roads so that these empty chairs are less empty and full at the dinner tables at the respective houses where these people lost their lives. And so that is critical to us, again, tying everything together in a very implementable, sustainable fashion that allows us to realize efficiency. But at the end of the day, how do we impact the 5.5 million people that go to work every day or going to school? How do we impact the 11.5 million people that live in the state of Ohio and our friends that pass through? 60% of the United States live within a one-day's drive of Ohio. So it is critical for us to keep our eye on this. And so we like to tie all of these particular pieces to the asset management plan and the implementation portion of it. So with that, I'm done. I went a little bit over, but I wanted to make sure that I honed in on what we think is critical in terms of implementing a sustainable transportation asset management plan, and that's all I have today. Yana, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Andrew. I really enjoyed hearing the kind of the breadth as well as the depth of some of the things you're doing to take the next steps in implementing your asset management through the TAMP and all of your efforts. I think that I'd like to hear more in the future about some of the details of how you're organizationally and the information side trying to connect all the pieces. So anyway, thank you. We'll now hear from Brad McCaleb, who has pre-recorded his presentation. Brad is currently the Division Engineer of the System Information and Research Division at the Arkansas Department of Transportation. Brad is a licensed professional engineer in both Arkansas and Texas. Prior to joining ArDOT, he worked for the Texas DOT, serving as the director of the Texas-Arkansas Metropolitan Planning Organization, and was the director of the Bryan College Station, Texas MPO as well. We'll start with the presentation.
Okay. Hello, my name is Brad McCaleb. I'm the Division Engineer for the System Information and Research Division with the Arkansas Department of Transportation. I appreciate the opportunity to present to you all today. Arkansas Department of Transportation is responsible for the 12th largest highway system in the nation with almost 16,500 centerline miles. 3,365 of those are on the NHS, and that represents about 21% of our total system. About 19% of our bridges in Arkansas are on the NHS. Working through the development process for the TAMP has resulted in additional resources being provided to our staff that has allowed us to improve our pavement and bridge condition data analysis. The accuracy of our pavement database has improved, and we are continuing the process of improving our deterioration curves and updating our cracking data formulas. For our bridge data, we've learned a great deal about how our project programming process impacts our bridge funding and have been able to further refine our forecasting process as a result. Another area of progress for us has been implementation of our risk management, which has gone relatively smooth. We held a risk management workshop and developed a risk register that identifies risk categories and their associated risks. The likelihood of occurrence and impact severity for these risks were assessed and then assigned an action priority of high, medium, or low. A risk mitigation plan was developed that addresses the high action priority risks, assigns ownership for addressing them, and establishes a completion date along with initial activities. We also formed the TAMP Risk Management Committee, which consists of ArDOT staff and a representative from the Arkansas Division of Federal Highway Administration. Our committee meets annually or as needed to review the risk register and the mitigation plan. We've also experienced some challenges in trying to implement the TAMP. ArDOT's investment strategy and as a result our programming process is based on available funding and the following four statewide categories: interstate rehab program, pavement preservation, capital and capacity, and our bridge program. We don't program by work types, which has led to some challenges in and of themselves. On that issue, ArDOT's types of work do not align with the federal work types. There's no clear definitions of treatments or activities included with the federal work types. So those various treatments and activities can be utilized in more than one work type or assigned to more than one work type. This led to an unsuccessful attempt on our part to try to align our STIF types of work with the federal work types by performing a project-by-project crosswalk. We currently can't include maintenance work types as well because our financial system doesn't track maintenance costs by project. The best that we can do is track them by route and section. Another area that has been a challenge is the conversion of our pavement condition ratings to the federal good, fair, poor ratings. The bar chart on the right shows our internal pavement condition index. This is the pavement condition rating that we use when evaluating our pavement data and make recommendations for projects. The chart in the middle shows the condition of the National Highway System routes using good, fair, poor ratings that are based on our internal pavement condition index, where our A and B ratings are combined into good, our C and D ratings are combined as fair, and our F ratings are poor. The bar chart on the left, labeled federal, is the condition of the National Highway System based on the federal good, fair, poor criteria for their individual metrics. Comparing our good, fair, poor results to the federal good, fair, poor results, is obvious that there is not full alignment between them. One of the contributing factors to our inability to align our condition ratings with the federal ratings is the difference in the criteria used for cracking data. The view on the left shows the portions of the pavement in the wheel path that are considered for condition ratings due to cracking based on federal requirements. According to those requirements, this view would be classified as alligator cracking in fair condition. The full pavement distress, as shown on the right, reveals block cracking that we would categorize as poor condition. To summarize the differences between the federal pavement condition ratings and our condition ratings, our ratings are based on a combination of the qualitative metrics, including a more complete evaluation of cracking. Federal conditions are based on an equal weighting and the majority rating for metrics as either good or poor. The biggest issue with this is that cracking has a greater impact on pavement condition than the federal criteria reveals. So I have to use about 51 words for my comments on this slide. The slide shows what we refer to as the yellow map, which is based on federal criteria, as compared to our internal pavement condition index map. This is the visual difference between our PCI-based ratings and the federal good, fair, poor ratings. This concludes my presentation. I appreciate the opportunity to share some of our successes in implementing the TAMP and some of the challenges that we're still working on. Thank you very much.
All right. Our thanks to Brad for preparing that video. For our finale, we have Dave Solstrud and Shannon Foss from the Minnesota Department of Transportation, who have also pre-recorded their presentation. Dave Solstrud is MnDOT's Asset Management Program Manager, focusing on implementing MnDOT's Transportation Asset Management System, supporting implementation of the TAMP and data management and other asset management initiatives within MnDOT. Shannon Foss is the Asset Management Planning Director at the Minnesota Department of Transportation. She directed the internal development of MnDOT's statewide Transportation Asset Management Plan, which was recently certified by FHWA. So let's get started.
Today we are going to talk about our experience in implementing MnDOT's Transportation Asset Management Plan, or TAMP. Now, most of the folks on this call are aware that all state DOTs were to submit a TAMP this year. MnDOT has received full certification both on their TAMP as well as the consistency determination. So we're going to talk about things that we're doing at the agency as next steps to implementation. Now, we have a lot of initiatives here as far as implementation goes, but I'll highlight a few of these. Part of our TAMP development, we included 12 assets in our TAMP. So there was a wider net casted throughout the development process, and that brings kind of further awareness throughout the agency that the TAMP exists. And we house all of the pavement and bridge data at MnDOT for NHS owned by other agencies, and that's a very small percentage. So we didn't have a lot of coordination with owners of other asset owners as other agencies may have. And another thing to highlight is the creation of a dedicated asset management program office. So that really helps move that implementation piece forward. Now, what we'll focus on today are these three that we wanted to cover. That would be coordination with other plans, our TAMP implementation chapter, and our internal asset management implementation workshop. Now, what folks are paying the most attention to is our requirement for our consistency determination on an annual basis. So I think the strongest connection from our TAMP is the connection to our other plans at the agency. So the development of the TAMP lives within the planning functional area at our agency, but we're successful because there's a lot of coordination with the asset management program office. Now we have a separate investment plan at MnDOT called the Minnesota State Highway Investment Plan, or MnCHIP. So that really shows our investment trade-offs, and it's a very public-facing document that is publicly vetted, where folks can see we have financial constraints, so how are we making trade-off decisions? And now asset management falls under the system stewardship category. This shows awareness that system stewardship or asset management is just a piece of the pie as far as funding goes. Now the MnCHIP is on an update cycle where our pilot TAMP fed MnCHIP, and MnCHIP fed our draft TAMP, and now our final TAMP will feed MnCHIP again. So it's an iterative process where these plans really work together. An example of a benefit that our TAMP provided for this MnCHIP is better understanding of the need for roadside infrastructure. So that's really where those additional assets feed into that, showing that need. Also, we have a statewide multimodal transportation plan, or SMTP, and so this shows more of the policy and trends for our agency, things to consider in the future. It really ties in as far as our risks, understanding where we're headed in the future, as well as it reports on some of our performance measures and targets, and overall system stewardship. So again, our TAMP, we're not required to do extensive public outreach. However, that takes place with these two plans. Now, with that consistency determination, FHWA recommends that we show consistency based on annual funding by work type for both pavement and bridge. Now, we have our 10-year capital highway investment plan and our 4-year state transportation improvement program. So this really shows what we already have planned or programmed at the agency over the next 10 years. And this shows specific projects by work type, including costs associated with them. We just rolled out a new system called the Capital Highway Information Management Enterprise System. So that really helps us conveniently pull this data of that we need for that consistency piece. Now, I think we're not unique in regards to the fact that we're required to show this data by the 5 work types identified by FHWA. MnDOT does not use those 5 work types, so we had to perform sort of a crosswalk to fit into those buckets. Now, in our asset management plan, we have a final chapter focused just on implementation. So this really serves as a work plan for the agency. We talk about risk mitigation strategies that we, in a prioritized manner, that we should be tackling at the agency. They also include information such as who's responsible, how much it will cost, how much time is needed to perform these risk mitigation strategies. So that really helps us prioritize our implementation For example, if we were to receive new funding, we know exactly where that would be allocated as far as some of these implementation pieces. Also, it identifies research priorities for the agency. One common research priority amongst assets is better understanding deterioration for assets beyond pavement and bridge, because that is something that's a little harder to predict. So that's kind of a big thing that we're going to focus on next. So this also serves as more of an accountability piece as well. It tracks work that has been completed to implement the TAMP. So we also included that in our consistency determination. An example is our pilot TAMP recommended new assets to be included in our asset management system. So this was executed and reported in this chapter as sort of a celebration of progress. Now I'm going to hand the reins over to Dave.
Okay, thanks Shannon. Thanks for that nice description. Yeah, so my role in the agency is focusing in large part in terms of implementation, TAMP, as well as other initiatives that MnDOT has taken on and really making the connection to our districts. And so a lot of work has been done in our TAMP. As Shannon mentioned, we've got about a dozen asset classes covered within that TAMP. We used an expert work group sort of structure to help do the analysis for the TAMP, identify the risks, determine risks, prioritize them, do life cycle costing, for example. For all the assets we had in the TAMP, we set measures and targets basically for their performance. So there's a heavy reliance on experts that came from our specialty office as well as folks in the districts. And so our next step with the TAMP, having all that work done, was really to get the TAMP to be understood by the decision makers, primarily in the districts. So MnDOT has a pretty decentralized decision-making structure for its financial and capital programs, as well as its maintenance activities. So the decisions made in the districts are obviously critical in terms of our consistency with the TAMP, and so it was our goal then to have all those decision makers understand what is in the TAMP, what the commitments made through the TAMP are, and what is necessary to achieve consistency. And we're thinking about this on an ongoing basis here. So an approach that we took back in April this year was to hold a workshop, and the basic structure, the goals of the workshop were to provide the information and understanding of what's in the TAMP, and then to spend some time identifying barriers to its implementation and different strategies that we should try and adopt for the implementation of the TAMP. So Shannon did a great job as a project manager of that. We got help from Applied Payment Technologies, Katie Zimmerman, who also helped tremendously in terms of organizing and facilitating that workshop. So we had a 2-day workshop set up. The audience included really the full invitee list of district management teams, local planners, district planners, maintenance leaders were also involved, as well as our expert offices from central office, and then of course senior leadership really representing the waterfront of folks involved in decision making. So again, back to the agenda, a little bit more specifically, we taught about the requirements of MAP 21 and the rulemaking through FHWA for both the TAMP as well as the consistency. And then that first day spent really kind of walked through chapter by chapter of all the data that's in the TAMP. And then, as I mentioned, the second day, identifying barriers to implementation of the TAMP. You can see a handful of items identified there as significant barriers. Another barrier, maybe a few more barriers that we identified were clarity of roles and responsibilities, And we also talked a bit about future directions that we might want to go with MnDOT's asset management program. So there's just a little iteration of some of the things that we found to be challenges. I mentioned the decentralized decision making, competition for funds, preventive maintenance, for example. Again, back to the roles and responsibilities, and that whole preventive maintenance culture. So successes, one of the things that really resonated for us was how engaged folks were that manage assets across the department. People really viewed the TAMP as an opportunity to bring some recognition and help to provide funding for assets that they're so passionate about in many cases. Okay, and where do we go from here? We identified a number of initiatives Shannon mentioned in the Chapter 9 implementation. We have a planning process where we will consider the communications needs going forward, additional training that we might need to do as well, and then really to bring things all together as some learnings of gaps in understanding and direction. Primarily through the workshop and some of the dialogues we had there, we have decided to initiate a strategic planning process and really to take stock of where we are at this point in time and really chart our course over the next roughly 5 years time frame. So that's how we're looking at establishing where do we go from here and the future for MnDOT's asset management and TAMP implementation efforts. Thank you.
Okay, great. Our thanks to Dave and Shannon for recording that presentation. All right, so that concludes our presentations for today. Thank you to all our attendees. Now it's time for the Q&A. If you have a question, please type it into the Q&A feature on the toolbar, and I will do my best to take them in the order that they were asked. So the first set are for Karen, and the first one is from Kent Miller. What is the source of the MoDOT national rank of revenue per mile? Karen?
So the source for that data?
Yes.
Like the 48?
No. What's the source of the ranking? Like who ranked that?
I think it came from Federal Highway, but it's in our tracker, so I can't tell you who the source is off the top of my head, but I can definitely let Kent know.
Okay, that sounds good. All right, next one's from Anne-Marie McDonald, and Anne-Marie asks you, how did you measure customer satisfaction?
So that's a great question. We've been doing it the same way since about 2009. We kind of experimented with a lot of different things prior to that, but we do a phone survey. It's done by a consultant where they are calling Missourians, and it's based on census data, so it's statistically valid. So based on the last census, they call so many people in each county based on the age and gender. And then we ask, how satisfied are you with MoDOT service? And then we go through and ask a number of the different operations. How satisfied are you with the condition of the major roads, the bridges, with snow removal, with debris removal? There's about 20 different things we ask. And then we go through and ask, how important is it to you that we do keep the roads in good condition, the bridges in good condition, just to be able to understand that. So we've been conducting this survey, again, in this format since 2009, and that's our gauge of how satisfied they are with what MoDOT does. And if she wants more information, I'd be happy to send her a link to the report.
Sounds good. Next question for you, Karen, is from Matt Hobrick. He'd like to talk a little more about the results chart that you shared. He wanted to just understand better the comparison baseline.
Okay, so what we do is we look at how many interstate miles did we say globally, all the districts together, in the asset management plan. So if it was 1,000, and then how many did we actually program into our STIP? And then the difference is, so for the number of interstate miles, the difference is a positive 4%. So we've got 4% more interstate miles in our STIP than what we said we would do in our asset management plan. Does that make sense?
Well, I think that, I'm not sure from Matt's perspective, but maybe he can follow up with you directly if he wants more information, but it sounds good to me. All right, our next question is a one for both of you, which is, in addition to pavements and bridges, is there any other asset that has good management systems for cross-asset trade-off analysis? Andrew, do you want to take that one on? You might be on mute. Maybe not. Karen, do you have any thoughts?
No, that's a tough one. Roads and bridges is the majority of our infrastructure. That's where the most asset value is. We're going to be adding in, we've already added in ADA because that's very important, the accessibility of the highways and bridges, and then we're going to be adding in mobility, but it's kind of when you don't have funding, it makes the asset management process that much more critical. When you've got a lot of money, then you can kind of go with the flow. But when you've got limited resources, the asset management, the cross-asset conversation becomes much more critical. So since we have we don't have any extra money, we're just trying to maintain the system. We have no performance gaps. We have none of that. It makes it tough. So no solution here.
Yeah. Steve, are you on?
Yes, I am.
Do you want to respond to that question? Yes. Do you want to respond to the question about what assets are better, in addition to pavement and bridges, are better prepared because they have information to be able to do cross-asset trade-off analysis?
It's quite a few states, I'll say quite a few, a number of states included culverts, lighting, ITS assets. More states are collecting that information. But I think a key issue ends up being, what are the weights, or how do you come up with the basis for that trade-off analysis? And I think that is what each state has to decide up front and it comes down to what's your performance target. And with the performance targets, and it's really where TPM and asset management comes together. And what are you willing to accept % poor and % good, and what do you call % poor and % good for traffic signals, ITS, the culverts. And once you work that out in your organization, I think it makes things a lot easier. I wish Minnesota hadn't had the message recorded, but they may be a good one to contact, or William Johnson in Colorado, because they've included quite a few assets. So,
yeah, and Connecticut is doing multiple assets, and California, I know, included multiple assets. Okay, the next question is for Andrew, and the question is from Emily Selby, and she wants to know, how does ODOT define efficiency and quantify that? Andrew, are you on?
Our efficiency is really a savings, but the reason why we use the term efficiency is that some of the things that we get are hard to quantify. And so the things that we could quantify in terms of a dollar is what we actually use. That's why I said that the dollar amount that I was showing you doesn't really show all of what we're saving. We have developed a return on investment calculator, and so we'll hopefully get some additional numbers to go with that. But in terms of things like being able to pave 1,700 additional miles, also like the chart that Karen showed, where we were getting some better bid prices, and some of the prices were coming in cheaper than what the estimate was. By putting in some new preservation treatments and actually having a collaboration with the industry, that has made some things a whole lot better in terms of bringing some of the costs down. So it's multifaceted, and we're trying to capture all those different pieces. And so that 400 million number is what we were trending towards, but I think it's actually a little bit more than that when you start talking about the labor hours and resources that we're utilizing and how much more efficient that we actually are. So we just call it an efficiency. The other reason why we do that is we don't want people to think that we're just growing new money and that there's a bunch of new money out there for them to go do other investments. We're pouring that money right back into the preservation program.
Thanks, Andrew. So our next question is from Bassie O'Neilly, and he's asking, who prepared the TAMPs for the following states: MoDOT, ODOT, and ArDOT? Were they in-house or consultants? And if consultants, who? So Karen?
So we did our own asset management plan. As I stated, it's all our own systems that we developed in-house with asset management, our pavement management, bridge management, TMS, everything. So we created our own.
Andrew?
We utilized the help of applied pavement technology in ours. We did a lot of the legwork, but they did a very good job of getting us organized and doing all of the steps leading up to the actual development of the plan. So it was applied pavement technology and Katie Zimmerman.
And with ArDOT, Brad's not on the call, but Spy Pond Partners, we supported the development of that TAMP. All right, the next question is from Crystal Harris. Ohio mentioned as one of their TAMP objectives, improve accuracy of the roadway inventory. Was there a change in technology or just a process change?
Both. We used to use DBase, which I know most of you know that's probably way obsolete, but and then we moved to Esri Roads and Highways. And what that also signified for us is that we were going to change some of our processes. And so we're continually to work towards doing that. But what that gives us the ability to do is to update the asset inventories more consistently. And we're still working through some of those workflows, but the processes are changing. So we had a dramatic swing away from DBase to the new Esri Roads and Highways implementation, and we actually successfully implemented it.
And she also asks you, are you managing your assets using different applications and programs?
Not totally sure what aspect you mean of managing them.
I think you are with DTIMS and your structures management systems. I think that's the question. Are you using a single system versus multiple systems?
We're using multiple systems with the requirement that it's utilizing the same our own data. So we're not as much concerned about the application as much as we are that it's open architecture, whatever we utilize, that utilizes the same data and utilizes our Ohio-centric LRS.
All right, we are really out of time, but there's one question that maybe you can answer quickly, the two of you, and it's from Kundai Mugabe, and he asks, did you document 23 CFR Part 667 compliance procedures in your TAMP?
Yes, we did.
We did also. We did a real deep
Okay.
dive on it too. So yes, we did.
Okay, and then one last question just came in from Kent Miller for what percentage of total transportation construction budgets go to bridge work? Do you guys have that figure off the top of your head?
No, I don't, but I can get it to Kent.
Yeah,
Okay.
Same here.
How about-
I don't have it off the top of my head, but I can get it to you.
All right, sounds good. Well, thank you, everyone. We are over time, and our next webinar will be held in 2 months on October 9th at 2 p.m. And at that webinar, we're going to cover highlights from the TRB Performance and Data in Decision-Making Conference that's going to be in September in Atlanta. I hope you'll be able to join us then. Additional webinars will be continuing for quite a while. Please send ideas for webinars you'd like to see. And just as a reminder, for more information, please visit tam-portal.com. Thank you to all of our presenters, and thank you to all of the participants. Goodbye.